All right, so welcome to the first Academy of Scholars webinar for this year. Where we're going to be talking about redeveloping writing habits. As faculty, we all have writing habits of some sort, right? Because that's our currency. But sometimes they can be more efficient and feel better than others. So I want to begin by acknowledging some of the wonderful resources that I've drawn this presentation from. So it's I've just done a lot of reading and looking at blogs and the resources that we have access to at FSU. So I've given credit as we go, but I wanted to point you to these three phenomenal resources. Dr. Caitlin Knox is a professor in French literature, I believe, but has a great blog and website on writing habits. NCFDD, of course, has a plethora of webinars and blog posts. And then Kathy Mazak as well, who focuses specifically on productivity and faculty life for faculty who identify as female. So here's sort of the overview. We're going to begin with a writing warm-up. So if you're watching it live, we're not going to share this with anybody. So it's your own private writing. Or if you're listening to this, you can, I'd encourage you to either write or think about the same topics. We'll then give a rationale for writing habits, what some writing habits are, obviously not an exhaustive list, and then how to, looking forward, maybe some ideas for how to enact some of these strategies. So we're going to begin with a writing warm-up. So the purpose of this, so this is from my dissertation class, but when we talk to our doctoral students, the focus of a dissertation is to become an expert on a topic. So we should be able to document and share this expertise with others. As faculty, we then have an area of expertise that certainly we can grow and change, but being able to communicate with ourselves and others, what our expertise is, what our purpose is, what our goals are, is important. So what I'm going to have us do is you're going to pick one of three prompts and just free write for 3 minutes. So this isn't a very long time. This is coming from Jan's blog post where she talks about prompts to make you smile. And so the three prompts to choose from are: one, you can think about what your real purpose is. So this could be holistically as a human being on earth, or focused on your specific role. So if you write your big picture goal sort of in the middle of a circle, what would be the next steps or directions or actions that would help you lead to that goal? Second option is write your own headline. So what would you like to read about yourself in 2, 5, or 10 years? Right. So thinking about the headline that you would like to see maybe in a university advertisement about you. And then a third option is to think about, what do you feel most strongly about? So where really is your passion and interest? So write down the big problem that matters most to you, or maybe matters most to you right now. So think about what problem gives you an itch you can't help but scratch. Or another way to think of it that I heard is, what poison do you want to develop an antidote for? So pick that and pick one of these three, and let's write for about 3 minutes. I'm going to give you 15, 20 seconds to wrap up whatever your thought is now. If you're finished, maybe think about it and smile. Okay, so we're going to come back to these goals that make you smile in a minute. Um, but first, let's back up a little bit to the rationale, right? As academics, we have to be convinced of everything. And so why should we have or think about writing habits? And I want us to think about what is our goal. So what should we be pursuing as in academia? Are we focused on success? And how would you define that? Or are you focused on mastery, a mastery of a set of skills um, that help you to achieve that larger goal? And so Dr. Sarah Lewis has this great book about creativity, the gift of failure, um, what to do with the ambiguous feelings that we sometimes have. There's an excellent podcast episode where Brene Brown interviews her to talk about this, which I'll link in the resources. But she has this quote where she says, mastery is not the same as success, right? So success happens and then it's gone. And especially in academia where I don't know where this came from, but the thought that it's a pie eating contest where the reward is more pie, right? So what is success? And often things take so long that success, whether it's notification if the grant is funded or a book contract or the book published, the seeing the manuscript online, that can feel kind of anticlimactic because so much goes on to it. So are we setting ourselves up for like emotional failure by focusing on like these individual success points versus when we think about developing mastery, where we are not just committed to a goal, but a constant pursuit, realize that if the great artists or athletes, they aren't successful every time, right? They don't hit every free throw. Every painting is not a bestseller, but it's the repeated practice of it that eventually leads to those things that may be seen as successes. So what are some, again, non-exhaustive list, writing habits that we can develop to help us think about developing mastery or, whatever you think, however you describe your larger goal, and how to still feel good while we're doing it, and still like acknowledge that we are humans and that no matter how much of our identity and joy comes from our academic work, that is not the entirety of our lives. So as a preview, we can talk about 5 main categories of habits: setting goals, setting and keeping regular writing times, developing and implementing routines, self-monitoring, and externalizing accountability. So some of these might not be brand new to you. You may have heard of these or tried them, but I hope that at least in a few of these, I'll give you a different perspective. We're going to begin with a self-assessment. So those of you who are live can click on this link. Those of you who watch it or listen to it later and the resources can access this to do your own self-assessment. So I'm going to put the link into the chat, but as a teacher, I'm going to give you all instructions before giving you the materials. So what I want you to do is put a black check next to habits that you have intentionally tried to develop or you have developed, right? So anything you've tried. You're then going to put a green check next to habits like you currently have in place. So I've not just tried them, they are in place. And then I want you to put a red check next to habits that you think will be hard. And so we're going to use Jamboard so you'll be able to see where everybody else's checks are. Okay, so there's the Jamboard, and I'll put the instructions back up. just wanted to be able to see it in a smaller window.
Can we use multiple colors on one?
Oh, yes. Yes. So my recommendation is start with black. So anything you've ever tried, check it black. Then go through and of those, so anything green will also have a black, right? So look at things you currently have in place, and then red, even if it might be something you've tried, or maybe, oh, I've never tried that because I already have some resistance to it. That would be red. So if we look at the sort of what I love about Jamboard here is that we can all be anonymous. They give us our cute little anonymous animals, but we can still see what, where each other are. So it looks like everything has been tried except for opening and closing routine. So that was new for me. And it's not been tried. So it looks like it's something that we find might be more difficult. Um, Okay, so let's get into those habits. So the first one is set happy goals. Goal setting is not new for any of us in education, right? We teach others how to do this. As a special educator, like we spend a lot of time on goals and SMART goals and things like that. Happy goals are different. So Jans talks about these, and she has a great article in Medium that I'll link, where the rationale is that you want to use your future self to motivate your current self, right? I have the opposite problem. I love to make things future Jenny problems. So like that can be a future Jenny problem. In some ways that's healthy because once I schedule like a time to think about a task, I don't think about it until then. But I also push a lot of things off. So the writing prompts, like we opened with, are ways to start with big picture planning. I wouldn't say we would do this every single day, but if on a regular basis, weekly, monthly, beginning of semesters, to kind of make sure you have alignment between your activities and your values and your goals. Prompts help. We want to dream big and smile, especially if this is something private and you're just doing for yourself. And then you want to look at that big goal often, right? So that we can keep smiling and keep remembering what sort of our big so what is. I have it here on a sticky note for myself. I also use this as a way to say yes or no to opportunities, to try and fight that scarcity mindset. Not every goal we have is going to be happy. So Jans calls these ghastly goals. So the goals might not be your choice, but they have to be done, or you have to do them in order to get to the goal, your bigger goal. And we can keep those separated from our happy goals and acknowledge that not every part of our job or our lives needs to be like 100% fulfilling and enjoyable. That's not realistic if that's something that you're chasing. But we want to rewrite this big goal often so we aren't, getting stuck because our research agendas change. In education, the world changes, right? And so it might change our priorities. And then share those big dreams or those goals. It might be something you put on Twitter, it might not. It might be something that you're just developing maybe a writing group or a collaborator that you can be honest and open with about these things. And we'll talk about that in our last habit. So in addition to these like big happy goals, we have to set more actionable goals in order to actually accomplish things, right? Knox calls these product focused micro goals. So we know that academic projects are unwieldy. Some of us are better than others at maybe like managing all those plates. But product focused goals help to break down projects into micro goals. So if you're familiar with NCFDD's core curriculum and doing their every semester has a plan, this is very similar to that. It really aligns well. So your product focused goals break down your projects into micro goals and you can do that at a weekly level this will then go into your writing time. So just thinking about what will you have written at the end of this writing session, at the end of the day, at the end of the week or the month. And the benefit is then when you sit down to write or work or read or think or code, you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, because I often spend time deciding what to do again and what can I make future Jenny's problem. This can help you. You've already made that decision. That's not a decision you need to make when your writing time starts. So you can think about those micro goals. So by the end of the week, if you do goal setting and reviewing weekly, which again aligns with NCFDD's weekly meeting recommendation. And so you want to define sort of the larger piece of whatever it is that you're working on. If it's to submit a grant or write a book prospectus or, writing an article. So what exactly are all those components? So in special ed, we would say task analyze that, right? Break it down into all the things that you need in order to achieve that. And then think about for the week, for your specific goals, not just what it is, but like what type, because we know the writing process is long and looks different. So is your goal just a first outline? Well, then we can set our expectations there and we can, as I said, rein myself in. Sometimes when I get too attached to my like words and phrases and thinking about transitions, when I'm thinking, oh, this is just a first outline. This is a topic outline, broad strokes. This is going to help me stay on task. You also want to identify, quantify your goal. So people have very strong opinions about this aspect. I do not. I'm this is a tool, depends on what you're working on in the phase. Tracking words can be really helpful when your goal is that like drafting phase. It might be time if you're in coding or analysis or, creating tables and figures or editing, right? So, but somehow quantify your goal so that you know what it is that you want to accomplish. If you're not familiar with Anne Lamott, I love Bird by Bird. In fact, my doctoral advisor gave everyone, I was trying to see if it's on my desk, little birds, like figurines. And so it kind of helps remember the way that we approach these large academic writing tasks. So Anne Lamott talks about shitty first drafts. In my lab, to make everyone comfortable, we call those sloppy copies. But I have linked here, and then if you just look up her essays, it's really great about your mindset when you are in the writing process and being aware of where you are to help you set those reasonable goals. So once you have those product focused goals, you break it down, right? So it might help to just have an unranked list of all action steps, a brain dump, choosing the big 3 or, however your writing time is, but prioritizing them. And then reflecting on those goals, coming back to them. I am very good at setting up systems. I'm good at, but like using it and following through on systems, that would be where my ADHD like derails me. But again, going back to this regular weekly meeting with yourself or whatever the frequency is that works for you to come back and reflect. And a lot of the habits coming from here rest on the assumption that is a habit that you have. So reflecting can also be helpful depending on what it is that you're tracking. So are you just going to reflect on, did I meet my goal or not? Why not? Also, what did you learn about your process? Maybe how you felt during that time. So we'll come back to this when we talk about self-monitoring. The only people who publish things are, well, I won't, that's an overgeneralization. The majority of people who publish did so by writing, right? So like they had to actually sit down and do it at some point. So there are anybody who's kind of in the academic productivity space generally has an opinion about how often we should be writing. NCFDD like really believes in that minimum 30 minutes of daily writing. Kathy Mazak really acknowledges that might not be for everyone, depending on your caretaking responsibilities, your job sort of, and your own personal preferences. So I'm not saying it has to be every day or that every day is bad, but it just needs to be regular. Things that you proactively establish, like I'm budgeting this time, just like I budget my money to this activity. And the amount of time you budget should be, commiserate or match your job, your goals, what your role is. When we should be writing, well, stay tuned to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. It just needs to be consistent. And then in order to make it consistent, you have to set and keep your regular writing appointments with yourself, right? So the benefit of the that I found for the college weekly writing times is that it's a calendar invite. It's there. I'm nice because I have accountability of like people will be waiting for me. But sometimes I'm curious what group you fall in, if either. So do you identify more with number one of like, I set appointments, but I don't keep them? So Knox says the solution for that is external accountability to help you keep it. Another option is maybe you do write regularly, whether that's scheduled or not, but it happens. But you don't always feel focused or productive. In that case, the self-monitoring, setting goals and self-monitoring can help you find when and under what circumstances are you most productive? When do you write the best? When does it feel good? And while sometimes our schedules, aren't entirely in our control, right? So I have small children at home. And so even if my ideal time was like 4 to 8 p.m., that does not fit with the stage of life that I'm in right now, right? But if it was, maybe one day a week, that could be what I do. So it just helps you to be aware and make intentional choices. So once we have those goals set and we are working on our goals, the third habit that Knox talks about, which was pretty new to me, some components of it I thought about before, but based on our self-assessment for those attending live, this was the newest one. That's opening and closing routines, implementing routines. So an opening routine is just the series of actions you do each time you sit down to write. So over time, it's your brain associating those actions with writing. As a behaviorist, we would call that stimulus control, right? Of my brain, it all starts to know that these things signal it is time for me, to do this type of work. Closing routines then obviously happen at the end, and it's a series of actions you do each time you end a writing session. So it will support the other habits. It's things like doing mini self-monitoring, recording it, thinking about what, leaving yourself breadcrumbs. So I'll get more into the specifics, but the goal is that you then set yourself up for your next writing session, and you don't have to decide what to write or what you're going to do. You've already made that decision. So again, opening routines are developing stimulus control. So that would be, there is science behind how and why that works. B.F. Skinner, which probably most of you know at least the name from behaviorism. He has a really great article. It's titled How to Discover What You Have to Say, a talk to students. So it is intended for like graduate students. But he's got a great little essay that I have linked here on ways to consider this. There's also people who have published on habit development, and this kind of fits in line with that. So what some of these cues could be is maybe you have a preceding event, like I'm always working on my laptop, I have this particular beverage. I have to have warm coffee in the morning when I have my morning writing times. 2 or 3 days a week, I write from about 4:30 to 6:30 because I don't like to work in evenings. And that's when my brain works really well before everyone else wakes up. But even if I'm worried about waking up a child sleeping on the couch, I have to have that warm coffee. It like sets it off, right? So it can be other types of sensory input, blankets. I think it's an artifact from COVID where I can't work at my desk at home without a blanket on my lap. I will turn up the air conditioning and the fan. Um, my doc students told me to just start bringing a blanket to the library, that nobody will care if I need to do that when we write in person. It could be the location. If you love coffee shops, or I love nothing more than writing on an airplane, listen to a Spotify playlist of coffee shop noise, airplane cabin noise. It could be the time of day. Again, it could be other people. Like I love writing in community. Um, Knox talks about your emotional state, but our emotions are not always reality, and they don't always lead us in the best directions, right? My emotions often make things future Jenny problems. So we don't want to really rely on this. I have to be like motivated or feeling good or, XYZ in order to write, because that leads to binge writing. That leads to only writing and working up to deadlines, which is something we all do, but it doesn't feel good for that to be your default. So when we implement an opening routine, it's simply thinking about like, what are those things that I could use consistently in order to signal to my brain, like it's time to work, checking emails done, talking with colleagues is done. This is what I need to focus on now. And for anybody with, for example, ADHD, this helps to, where impulsivity of thought and inattention of thought, or I even get hyper focused on something. And then when it becomes my writing time, I want to stay hyper focused on that thing. This type of routine helps me to like detach from that and attach to what I'm supposed to be doing. The more cues, the better. And I have linked here, and Knox has provided Google Forms as opening routines. I personally just have it as a tab in my writing tracker where I remind myself, these are the things that I say, I've learned help me get focused. And then also closing routines. So while the opening routine helps you get focused and start something, we also need to be able to stop, right? Because if we're never off, we can't be on. And all of us have multiple projects and things going in our head, personal and professional. And so closing routines help you to say, like, I'm done with this now, and here's what I'm going to think about it again. And I don't need to ruminate on it. So a critical aspect is that you commit to your next writing session. So it's looking at like, when is the next time I'm writing? Maybe it's after lunch the same day. Maybe it's not until the next week. And then what is it that I'm going to work on there? So next steps, action items, I call this breadcrumbs. Especially maybe if I have a Google Doc where I'm working with others, I'll leave a big note that says, note to future Jenny, here's what you were thinking. Here's where you need to pick up. So we all underestimate how much we will forget about what we're working on the next time we work on it, right? I underestimate my ability to remember things from one room to another. I think like, oh, I don't need to write that down. I'll remember it. I will not. So writing these things down also helps you sort of like close out all those tabs in your brain. You don't have to keep them open because you've already set yourself up for success the next time that you sit down to write. So we implement a closing routine just like the opening routine. Decide what it's going to be, use it consistently, decide what do you like about it, what do you not like about it, what needs to be adjusted. But you're not going to know and remember those things unless you track it. So it's coming back to that self-monitoring piece, because we also won't reliably remember how we felt about something later, right? That retrospective recall is not always accurate. And again, she has links for Google Forms that once you set it up, all populate to like a spreadsheet. So if that type of automation is your jam, she has done a lot of that legwork for you. So that all brings us to self-monitoring. So being aware of um, uh, what we're doing, why we're doing it, how it felt. So this identifying what our goal is, whether our goal is a product focused goal or just like mastery, like developing mastery of a writing habit. And then being aware and having that metacognition of am I moving towards that goal or away from that goal? What's influencing it? And I think that, this helps us to remember that we are human and to talk to and treat ourselves the way that we would our colleagues and our students. I don't know about you, but I'm much more harsh internally on myself. I would probably never talk to others with, the way that I can speak to myself about productivity. And so this helps to notice that we're not robots. We're not the same as anyone else. I'm not the same as the way I was pre-COVID. Um, uh, I'm not the same as I was in my doctoral program. So what worked for me then might not work for me now. So the benefits of tracking are that it helps you to set reasonable expectations for a similar task in the future. Again, because I not only do I underestimate how much I will remember, I underestimate how long something will take me always, or how much I'll be able to do. It also gives you this concrete record of productivity where maybe you have these large things and you feel like you're not making progress in the way you want to. This helps you go back and sort of talk to that inner critic of, no, I established when I was going to write, I set my goals and I did it. I have done what I said I was going to do. There's no need for any other sort of thoughts about it. It also helps you to align your tasks with your energy level, something that both Kathy Mazak and NCFDD talk about, which changes over time, right? So some of us want to start the day maybe with meetings, with conversations with others, because that kind of gets us up and going. Others, like once I have those meetings, it's really hard for me to focus again on deep work. So I need to get my deep work done first before kind of everything else comes in. So it helps you identify that. I used to be a great morning writer at any time in the morning. I've now realized that it works really well for me first thing, like if I wake up early. But then I'm really not ready to write again at 8:30 or 8. I need to like do a pass through my emails, a pass through my Slack, of who's messaged me the night before, because hopefully I haven't been on it, or haven't felt like I have to be on that at night. And I kind of need to uh, play that whack-a-mole for a minute before like my brain can focus again. And I didn't used to be like that. So another thing that a way that you can track your energy level or become more self-aware is chronotypes. So this is some research from Daniel Pink, and he looked at research from psychology, biology, and economics on human timing and performance. And he came up with these 3 categories of people. He also used a bird theme, which I love birds. So he categorized people as larks, meaning they naturally wake up and get out of bed before 7. So like childcare independent, like work independent, your rhythm, would you just naturally get up before 7? Third birds and I wonder why he called it that, because why not just give it another name? But anyway, third birds naturally wake up between like 8 and 10 a.m. So that would be like their natural state. And then owls would sleep until after 10, right? And so they are waking up, if they had the ability to, later, right? And so each one of us has peak energy, trough energy, and then recovery. And so those of us and sort of our society right now is built around larks, like jobs and society and schools, everything functions around, you probably need to wake up at or around 7 because you're going to have something to do around 8, 9. But this helps us to, and as academics, we generally have much more flexibility in our schedules, is to align our tasks with that productivity. Okay. So when you think about the chronotype, and when you have a peak, when you have a trough, and when you're in recovery, here's kind of what that looks like. So if this is totally new to you, or like me, I've been in this job and had children so long, like, I don't know. I don't, at this point, I would sleep till noon. I'm just have the luxury of it. Um, but the peak of sort of your energy level is when you're most focused and vigilant. That is really good for that analytical, deep work. And that's the time you want to protect at all, if at all possible. And for example, like protecting if it can be 1 or 2 days a week. The trough is what happens after that, right? So that's where you have a decrease in cognitive performance. Your mood might decline. You're losing it. What you had, and I find entering the trough so frustrating, especially if I've had a really good peak, and then I am like, oh, why can't I just keep going? It's because I'm not a robot, right? It is a good thing that we have this variability in our energy. So that's when you probably don't want things that want a lot of focus. That's where the admin, low cognitive tasks. It could be a good time for creativity, depending on you. And then recovery is where, like, you might have high focus again, but not high vigilance. So we might be able to get things done, but it might not be your deepest, best work. So maybe brainstorming, big picture thinking. So for me, my peak is definitely in first thing in the morning, 9:30 to about 11:30 or noon. I then have a trough. And then recovery about 7 to 9 p.m. My brain starts to wake back up, which can be frustrating when I want it to go to sleep. Um, but also I can sort of capitalize on that time when I want to. So again, if you think about your chronotypes, larks and third birds, this is broad generalizations from his research, do best on analytical tasks in the first 6 hours of their day, meaning from when you wake up. Um, and then at trough, it's a good idea to do creative and admin tasks. Owls might be able to get some analytical tasks done in the morning, especially if like this is just the way our society works. But they may really do their best analytical work in the evening after dinner or after you put children to bed or things like that. So based on this information about your chronotype, we can use that to help us set our regular writing appointments. So this is where Kathy Mazak calls it your soar state, that peak. When is your soar state? And can you protect that? Blocking off 1 to 2 hour chunks for those soar sessions where I can align my task to, the Tuesday and Thursday mornings I get to write. That's where I put those really deep things. I put my other goals other places. And it is important to write, even if you feel like you're slogging, because you need to be consistent. We don't want to rely on emotions only, or waiting for this like perfect scenario, because again, that leads to binge writing. This doesn't mean that I was just having a conversation with my doc students yesterday about like if we're having just a day or an afternoon where we're not feeling good, there's external things happening, either personally, professionally, in society. Recognizing that and sort of acknowledging I'm not a robot. And even though like generally Tuesday mornings are a great time for me to write, there may be times where like that's just not it. So I think it's important we also give ourselves grace in that area. And then if it becomes a consistent thing, then that might be something to look more into. So we are able to do all of this by engaging in self-monitoring and self-reflecting. And we want to look at both our thought patterns and our behaviors. Well, thought patterns are behaviors from my perspective, but the like what we do are external behaviors. So we first have to notice, right? So even becoming aware, which sometimes, depending on how you sort of where you are right now, that might feel scary or uncomfortable, or I would rather just like not look at that and not think about behaviors I have, like making things future Jenny problems or getting hyper focused and spending too much time on irrelevant details to procrastinate, setting my writing times, but never keeping them. So you have to just notice them, and you can start to notice them without attaching judgment to it. So a technique in DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, is this like radical acceptance of like this, it is what it is. I may not like it, but I'm at least going to acknowledge its existence, because pretending it's not there is not going to do anything. And then once we start monitoring it, we can start to see triggers, which we call antecedents. So is there a consistent thing that happens that's going to result in me feeling this way? And then can I develop some replacement behavior? So if I know that checking emails from students in the morning is going to make me just think about that and want to address that right away, then don't check, I'll leave those unread. Maybe looking at emails or social media at all before you write derails you. And so then just stop doing that. Wait until later. And then modifying your thought patterns and behavior. So you have to identify like, what should I be doing instead? And then you have to actually change something, because nothing changes if nothing changes. So if you think about for a second, what thought pattern or behavior do you think you might need to monitor or replace? So if you said, I don't know, Caitlin Knox has a whole blog post about how the answer is not that you do not know, it is that you do not want to say to yourself. All right. So this is her resource on this is fabulous. She says that if you say, I don't know, it's probably one of these three things. You do know, but you don't like the answer. You have convinced yourself that like, that's going to be too hard. I can't spend time on planning my writing and monitoring my writing, do all that. Cause like, when am I going to write? And especially if you haven't already put this system in place, then yeah, that is going to be harder. So it's like one problem contributes to another. And you may have a hard time like trusting yourself and your intuition, like what's going to happen if I make the wrong decision? That could be another thing. So I love where she says, I don't know, keeps you in a position of helplessness and leads you to inaction, right? It's the easy way out. But nothing's going to change if nothing's going to change. So if we're not thinking about this and evaluating regularly, then we're basically just hoping that everything works out okay. And it might, but is it going to be the best it could be? And are you going to feel the best you could be? So she has these like prompts that you can kind of go through. And then she also aligns some replacement behaviors with these. So something like, I don't know if I should put this paragraph first, what I'm going to say, where it's going, how to introduce this quote, how this piece fits in my book. So if that's the type of I don't know, where that is going to be different from something like I have doubts about. So I'm confused about. So a piece of this, which we'll talk more about when we get to strategies, is not just becoming aware of what you're saying in a broad way, but really drilling down to like, what exactly is it that you don't know or that you're unsure about? Because then we can match a strategy with it. So if you're familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, this is very like in line with that approach. So things that we can do once we've monitored and become aware of these thought patterns and behaviors is you can reframe those underlying thoughts. So this links to the blog post where she has an aligned like way to reframe your thoughts. I have it printed out and I can then like refer back to it. NCFDD has great resources on identifying your resistance. So that's sort of the term or the concept that they use of what sort of three categories of what your resistance falls into, right? Is it procrastination? Is it perfectionism? Those are different. Is it like I said, a psychological barrier or some other type of barrier that you're experiencing? Maybe something in your environment. And so these are, they have great resources for what to do about that. And then I recommend beyond just writing, because we have our self-talk and untruths that we tell ourselves impact us across our lives, right? As whole people. And so I have found this great resource that a good friend of mine, Julie at Texas A&M, sent me. It's called the Anti-Anxiety Notebook. I've linked it here on Amazon. It's not expensive. I feel like it's $35 or so, but it walks you through like a CBT process of really being specific about an event or what you're feeling. So whether that's something like personal or writing, like I was really, really distracted. I kept wanting to check my phone or my email or to work on something else. And then it has you walk through things like what's another perspective you could take? What type of thought pattern? Were you catastrophizing? Were you trying to be a perfectionist? So it helps to really nail down, as well as what exactly are you feeling and what's a different way that you could approach it. And just going through this mental exercise can help us to become aware of our thought patterns and reframe them for the future. So another habit, so the final one that we talk about is externalizing accountability and doing it often but thoughtfully. So this is so dependent. How this feels and how you do this is really dependent on our personalities, right? So some people really like that external accountability. My students have writing trackers that they share with me, and so it's in a Google document, so they know at any time I could go in and look. And some of them have said, like, well, I'm gonna have to share this for you with you for the rest of my career. I need to know that somebody else might be looking at it. It also helps you hold yourself to your own expectations, and maybe your expectations are not aligned with reality, or with your priorities or with what's going on right now. So again, helping you to treat yourself the way you would treat another person in your accountability group. Who you choose is important. So we know that some people are going to provide us encouragement, support, but we don't want people who are going to just enable us, who I can say all those false truths and excuses, and that'll be like, yeah, you're right. We want somebody who's going to be clear and kind with our accountability. Accountability can also look like soliciting feedback. So maybe it's not just, I need you to know I am writing, but I need some sort of mechanism for helping me monitor my progress towards my goals, specifically and academically. This is something that we, when we're doctoral students, have, and I think take for granted. And that was a really big shift of when I started, a tenure track position, and like, oh, I'm the one giving feedback. But it's one of those moments where, like, am I the adult in the room? Like, how is that? How is that the case? And so we can also solicit feedback through writing groups in that way. It is important, though, when you ask for feedback, and I've now started doing this with my students. I've asked them to tell me what are you looking for? Is this about the content? Is it about organization? Is it super like detailed into the style and tone? Because if they sent me something that's just a sloppy copy and they just want to know like the organization and the logic, I can then align my task to that and not like line editing, right? And feedback. And then also it then doesn't make them feel, it makes them feel fulfilled, right? So you can also do that for others. I know I have sent things to colleagues like Sonia Cabell, where I was writing about reading and reading development for students with autism. And I was really getting into theories, and I wanted to make sure that the way I had described it was accurate, right? So we can draw on the resources we have within our college and within our professional organizations to be able to draw on each other as subject matter experts, right? They don't have to be a formal co-author. And so to do all of these things, these habits, some of them sort of rely on others. And so the format that Caitlin Knox has outlined on her website, she calls them weekly writing reviews. So again, if you already have that Sunday meeting or the weekly meeting with yourself to set your tasks and goals and, kind of look at everything going on for the week. If you don't already do that, you should start. You should watch that webinar from NCFTD. but you can incorporate the weekly writing review, right? So she says it's the most valuable hour that you can spend each week. And it might not be a full hour. It was for me the first time, or when I'm, got a new project, let me really break it all out. But the benefit of doing things like your semester strategic plan through NCFDD is that you are at the beginning of a semester or quarter, or however frequently you do it, you're already identifying what those things are, right? So there can be some synergy amongst these different activities. And then she has sort of like entry points into a weekly writing routine, because it's important to set realistic goals, not just like, I'm going to change all my behaviors at one time. That is, I love to try to do that, because then I can set up a system and a spreadsheet and color coding. I might get a new planner, because that might save my life. But we should really just try some smaller behavior changes to use behavioral momentum to kind of work up to it. So that's why I love the way she outlined it into 3 levels. So beginning is like if you're already writing several times per week. So start there. And then she has some suggestions. And then you'll move up into intermediate. And that's where you're writing consistently and regularly at scheduled writing times. And so you've been doing this for a while. And then the advanced suggestions are you're already writing consistently and regularly, scheduling the writing times at times that align with your energy level. So it's kind of like once you're there, then here's some ways that you can continue to improve. And what I really like is that it aligns with this mastery goal rather than a success goal, so that I'm taking this long view of skill development and this long view of this is going to be something that I'm always going to be working on. And that should be exciting, not defeating. It should be exciting that I'm going to keep tweaking and refining and making sure that I am achieving the goals that I want to achieve, but I'm also feeling good while I'm doing it. So looking forward to maybe redevelop or develop some writing habits. Again, we don't want to change everything at once. That's not sustainable. We want to use behavioral momentum of embedding some routines, doing sort of a low lift of change, and then getting reinforcement from that and seeing how it feels, or naturally seeing that you need to go to the next step and following that. So the 3 sort of entry places to consider is having a weekly writing review, or incorporating this into your weekly meeting with yourself, making sure that you have those product focused micro goals so that when you sit down to write, you know exactly what it is you're doing. And then having these opening and closing routines so that when it is your writing time, you're on. And then when it's not your writing time, you're off. So I'll also share some resources, again, when I share the recording and in the YouTube notes of the webinar.